Everyone, good evening. Welcome to Boss versus Coach. I cannot start this show without thanking you all for your continuous appreciation and motivation. One of the reasons I feel for the same has been that we are making sense. We are picking topics which are relevant to you. But there is another reason which I feel is true, and that's because you are actively listening to us and finding us making sense to you. So I thought, why not pick active listening as the topic for today's show? Active listening is not about hearing words, it's about connecting with the emotion, the perspectives, and the sentiments of the speaker. When we listen with curiosity and care, we end up building insights, outcomes, and solutions. Way back in 1987, this concept was introduced, and active listening still today stand out to be the most transformative skills that we all need to cultivate. So let's unfold the power of active listening. And we have a very special guest tonight who will bring her useful insights and some very dynamic ideas that will help you become an active listener. But before we introduce the guest, I would like to go to my co-host and friend, Olivia Gad. Olivia, welcome to the show. Hope you had a great Christmas.
Yes, I did, Mohit. Thank you so much. It's an interesting time, Christmas. Everyone talking, and who honestly is listening. So yes, a great topic to start a post-Christmas conversation.
So, Olivia, active listening, what do you think about it? We don't listen. I feel listening is enough. How can we listen actively?
Well, it's interesting, when people listen to you, what are they actually doing? And I think so many people, and myself included, often we're hearing the voices inside our own head. We're thinking about what to say next. We're curious about our own thoughts, rather than really leaning in with curiosity to the other person, noticing what's important. And you touched on it before. It's not just about the words. It's about the things that they don't say. It's about the body language. It's about the energy, the pace and the tone. And they say so much to us about maybe what's going on inside for someone. So for me, active listening is taking in all of that and helping the other person to make meaning and make purpose with the words that they're using.
I agree. I absolutely agree, Vandana. Sorry, Olivia, I absolutely agree to it. And I think that's where we miss in our temptation to respond, in our temptation to respond to the other individual. I think we often miss to listen.
Mm.
And I think that defeats the very purpose of conversation. Very true, Olivia, and I think it's time that we should bring our speaker on the show. So we have with us
Mm.
tonight Vandana. Vandana is a ICF certified leadership and resilience coach. She has also been a fellow of Mandela Washington Fellowship and has been someone who has been actively contributing in the field of coaching and mentoring. Vandana, welcome to the show.
Hi Mohit, hi Olivia. I'm very excited to be joining you.
So Vanna, as I think I have done a poor job with your introduction, so I would request you to please introduce yourself to the viewers and just tell something more about you.
I think you've done a stellar job, but maybe given the beautiful thematic of your show, I'd like to maybe say that I've launched my coaching practice this year, but I've been a boss, and I thought that to a large extent I was an okay boss, but having stepped more into the coaching field after 11 years in financial services, there's so much more that I'm learning about, the qualities of leadership and how having like being a good boss or having a good boss can change the quality of your life, and what specific skills are required to bring all that forward, that let's just say that I'm on a very steep learning curve myself. So this boss versus coach ideas is highly, highly relevant. And I'm very excited to contribute to it.
Welcome to the show, Vanna. And just to start with, why do you feel active listening is important, and what can we do differently to listen actively?
So I really like I think active listening, we've been hearing a lot about why listening is important, right? All of the big headlines. It creates better connections. It strengthens relationships. It creates trust. Um, and all of those unlock a lot of things that have the potential of really raising the caliber of your leadership as well. So if you have the ability to listen to someone and hear them out to the end without rushing to want to answer, like what you and Olivia just mentioned, maybe you develop the skill of learning to ask better questions, right? And in a leader or in a boss, that's something that can improve productivity. It's something that can improve the value of your decision making. It has a number of repercussions, right? Um, in terms of what are things that maybe people can consider doing, well, I just want to draw on my experience. I was talking earlier about this shift that I made, right, from boss to coach myself. One of the things that happened very early on in my early days as a coach is that you have this voice at the back of your head where you hear what someone is saying and you're just, okay, this is what I'm going to say next. And the very first thing they teach you when you learn to be a coach is just to shut that voice up and not rush to think that you know what the other person is trying to say. And so the two things that I learned for myself that maybe might be helpful here is that every conversation, every exchange has a certain rhythm. And if you're able to tap into that rhythm, as opposed to rushing to answer, then you might be able to respond better rather than kind of jump into what you think the person should be hearing. And part of that rhythm, which is the second thing, part of that rhythm is silence, right? So if you are able to cultivate a degree of silence, that improves the quality of your listening in an exponential way. And I think those are two things that are very easily overlooked. Silence in particular. I've got a lot of opinions on that as well that we can get into as well.
No,
I
I share that. I share that. As Mohit said, I've been teaching coaching skills for some years, and a lot of leaders, the biggest challenge they have is, what about that awkward silence that happens? And I like to reframe it as a productive silence. You know, if the other person is thinking, it's not awkward. It's okay. And the other thing I really love is there's a quote from Nancy Klein that the quality of somebody's thinking is directly related to the quality of your listening. And I think that's a beautiful thought, that you're really enhancing someone's ability to think by giving them the time, by giving them the space, by giving them the silence.
100%.
So, Olivia, very often, yeah, Vandana, please continue.
Sorry, Mohit. No, I was just loving that Olivia brought up the quality of listening, because for me, this is an idea that is at the crux of how do you improve or how do you tackle the idea of active listening. It's not, the purpose of it is to improve the quality of the information that you can extract, right? The meaning that you make of an interaction. And the quality of your listening is something that it's a skill that you can build. That I'll let you get into it.
So, Olivia, as I mentioned in the beginning, very often we see leaders and bosses, quite hurriedly responding to the individual, and they are very, I would say, very tempted to respond without listening fully to the speaker. It is also proven in various studies that almost 25% of what you listen gets retained with you. Is it that people sit with preconceived notions, or they form their perceptions before coming to the conversation that doesn't allow them to listen complete or listen fully? What's your take on this, Olivia?
I'd say it's both. I think, as Vandana said, we have our own voice going on in our mind. So as someone presents a problem, we're being super clever and solving it and figuring out our own answers. And we know our answers are great, so we want to share them. So we're sort of full of our own words. I think also maybe there's a certain arrogance of leaders that they know the right answer. And so they want to hurry the other person along to find their right answer, rather than maybe find a new answer, find something of their own, use their own words. And I've been on a similar journey of having been a leader for a very long time and then discovering coaching. And I thought, well, I'm a very coachy person. I can kind of do this. But I noticed, and I started to listen to myself more critically, that I was really good when someone was reaching for a word at giving them a word. And then I realized that's quite arrogant to assume I know the word that they want to find. Maybe it's a whole other word, and maybe I've broken their thinking by inserting mine. So that idea of holding yourself and just, I will always talk about leaning in with curiosity. It's like, what is on the tip of your tongue that you haven't yet found, and giving someone the space to do that.
I agree. So Vandana, what's your thought on this? Do you feel that leaders sit with preconceived notion, or it's just their arrogance or their superiority that doesn't allow them to listen well?
I think it's very likely that there's a lot of that going on, like Olivia's mentioned. Sorry, but I think it's also something that affects all of us, because we all experience the world through specific filters, and we all have the default position that our filter is the correct one. And so when you're trying to lead a team, right, and there's things like diversity and trust and all of these things that come up, that this is what you have to do as a leader, the first thing to do is to learn to shed this idea that you have the right answer, even though, and it's conflicting often with the fact that leaders are often responsible for setting vision and setting tone and setting, targets, right? So there is a balance to make, I think, with and Julian Treasure, who I'm a very, very big fan of his work, and he works a lot with the science of sound. He talks about this, right? Which is that as someone who is communicating, you have to, one, know what is the hearing, what is the listening that you're speaking into, what are the filters that various people hold, and from a separate perspective, when you talk about what makes successful leadership in today's world, right, where there's so much clutter, there's so much information all the time, you need leadership that is cognizant of the fact that it doesn't know all of the right answers. So you have to leave space for the fact that there might be blind spots, right? And when the purpose of having a diverse team is that different people will bring in different lenses and different perspective, different outlooks, and they will bring in what is their kind of thinking around different issues. And if you're not able to hear out something that is different than your opinion, then you're shutting down the benefit that you could get from those outlooks as well. So I think there is a balance, but 100% is something that affects all of us. So the moment that you're more aware that, okay, we all have a filter, then it helps you to kind of take a step back and actively disengage from that filter, so that you are able to meet the purpose of the conversation or that interaction. And there's this, Julian Treasure also talks about this, there's different listening positions that you can adopt, right? So sometimes you have to listen because you have to inject a new idea into the equation. You have to be receptive, right? Sometimes people need to get things off their chest, right? So then you may want to adopt a very empathetic listening position. Sometimes you have no time, right? You need to get to something in a very snappy way. So sometimes you need to just cut through the noise and get through to the core of the information, that you just hear yes or no and then move forward. So the ability of a good listener is also to switch between different listening positions. And you can't do that if you're not even able to disengage from your default mode at the outset.
Agreed. So that brings me to the thought, what can a person do to enhance his capacity of active listening? Because when I talk to leaders and I talk to my colleagues, I'm told that I'm listening and I'm listening quite well. What's wrong in that? Because they feel that they have listened everything that the other person was supposed to speak, and they have also conveyed their views or their responses back to the person. What can they do differently to assess whether they are an active listener, and if not, to become an active listener? Your thoughts, Vandana, Olivia?
Do you want to go first?
I will go first. Thank you. There's two things that I would suggest. One is, we talked earlier about the ability of improving the quality of your listening. And so there's a lot of very simple exercises that we can adopt to cultivate our ability to listen, right? Listen longer, filter out different things, pay attention to different things. And if I think there's again, Julian Treasure, lots of resources. If people are interested in doing that, I can share a bunch of resources with you that you can put in your podcast resources. But a very simple one is just to cultivate a few minutes of silence every day. Just sit with yourself and make a habit of silence. It's so easy. So it sounds very simplistic, right? But it can be very challenging when you're not in the habit of doing it. So flexing that muscle is something that can 100% help, because holding silence for someone else is one of the very first steps. Another thing that I would recommend is this framework called RASA. Again, Julian Treasure, I'm not done singing his praises. But RASA stands for receive, acknowledge, summarize, and ask. Right? So when someone is speaking with you, the idea of listening is through this framework of receive the information silently, acknowledge while you're receiving, like you both are doing with me right now, right? You're nodding. I know that whatever I'm saying is not just going over your heads, right? So I have a sense that you are paying attention. And so summarizing is also really critical in being able to filter out what is the core piece of the information. What is the essence of what you're trying to say? And then ask, be curious. Have I understood you correctly? This is what I heard. Is this actually, would this make a difference? Or what is the most important thing of everything that you've just explained, right? So asking the right questions is very much a direct result of how, deeply you would have been listening before. I am a very strong believer that there's no high caliber decision making without deep listening.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. And I'd have probably said something very similar. So now I'm going to just shift position a little bit. So I'm building on that. I think, we bounce from meeting to meeting, from conversation to conversation. So we're not often in a space where we have a calm mind. And I agree. I think practicing just sitting with a calm mind is really helpful. And one thing I'd say, which sounds obvious to any living, breathing human, is to breathe. Just to take a couple of breaths before you start the conversation, clear your mind and just give yourself enough oxygen in your system to be useful to the other person. And I love the RASA model. I think it's really, really helpful. One of the things I talk a lot about with my students is David Rock's Dance of Insight, which is a similar piece where it's a model that talks about starting a conversation with permission, is it okay to talk about this, but also placement. So actually getting a real sense of what is it that we're talking about and how would you like me to be? So that piece around, we don't have much time. Are you okay if I'm direct about that? Are you okay if we have a quick back and forward, or we have a bit of time? Would you like me just to ask you questions? Would you like me to coach you? So you can really get a sense of what is this conversation for? And with that purpose in mind, both of you can have a better flow. He then talks about thinking questions, those wonderful open questions for open thinking. And he also talks about clarification, that same piece around, okay, so what I heard was this. Is that what you meant to say? I heard you use this particular phrase quite a few times. What's important about that for you right now? And then going again, maybe back to placement. It's like, well, we've talked about a few things here. Are we on the right track? Would you like to go in a different direction? So I think there are so many of these models around that can be really helpful, and we all pick our favorites. But I think a lot of these things, they're doing the same thing. They're asking us to sit with someone, to give them the space, to acknowledge their conversation, but also their being. And that, that active, I'm hearing you, I want to know more, encouraging you. Do you know how awful it is when someone says they're listening to you and they're not making any eye contact and they're kind of looking away, and you're like, are you even there? And you can just, humans are very good at reading each other. We can see when someone's engaged or not. even when we think we're really good at masking, actually, if we're on our phone or looking around or thinking, it's visible. So I think there's quite a few things that we can do just through that self-awareness. You know, are we leaning in? Are we asking questions, or are we giving them our solutions wrapped up with a little question mark at the end? So I think that there's lots of things that we can do just to slow down, listen, clarify, and appreciate. Because again, so often, you know, you're listening to someone, you think, I totally disagree with what you're saying. It's buzzing in my head. I want to say something. And actually just breathing through that and going, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more.
I agree, Olivia, and I think one of the most frustrating habits I found when you're talking to someone and that someone is gazing at the laptop or mobile, so which clearly indicates that he is least bothered to listen to you. So that takes off the effort you bring on table in getting that conversation on. And at times the issues are so pivotal, so important that it really heartbreak the speaker, and it takes him off from the
Mm.
level of motivation and psychological safety as well. Because I think somewhere active listening is also linked to you creating a safe space for your team, so they should feel that they'll be heard and they'll be heard actively. So I think it's
Mm.
very deep. But my last question, because I wish I could have listened to both of you more, but the clock is ticking fast. So one last question, Vandana. Why should active listening be important? And with so much a leader is expected to deliver, so much a person is expected to gain and demonstrate, how come active listening be considered as a transformative skill?
There's an idea that I return to a lot, um, which is it's not about what you say or what you have to say, rather. It's about how people feel in your presence. And that is, in essence, a very effective leadership, right? So, strictly from a numbers perspective, right? If you're looking at how do I get more for the effort that I'm putting in, good listening is one of those tools that can make you, like, same team, same interaction, same relationships, you can get more out of it. Productivity, just simple, right? So if you're leading, right, and you're not looking at every single tool that can help you to extract more and do things more efficiently, then maybe you have to wonder about what the priorities are in that case. But I think, see, there's so much about human connection that feeds into what good leadership is today. And I think it can only be a positive thing, right? So even if you already think, and I'm 100% guilty of this, where you think that you're already a very good listener, there's so many more layers for you to explore and for you to dig in, that it's exponential what you can get back. So there's no ceiling to it. And even that's also an idea that hooks me. That, if you're in leadership and there's like a very simple thing you can do and keeps giving back to you, why would you not do it?
Agree. Olivia, your thoughts?
I love that, and I'd say that's the same for all human skills, whether they're coach skills or anything else, is that there's always room for more, for different, for experimenting. I'm a great one for how can you try things out and notice what happens, and did it work well? But I agree. I think listening is fundamental to all communication. It's not just about leaders and their teams. It's about within your team. It's about within your friendships, within your family. We don't have a lot of time on this earth. Just a slightly philosophical moment. And all any human really wants is to be seen and heard. We crave belonging, and we need to be noticed. And when we are ignored or put down or made to feel small, it just chips away at who we are a little bit. So I think it's everybody's responsibility to really notice each other, and that includes really listening to what each other is saying and what they're not saying.
Very, very thoughtful conversations, and thank you, Vandana and Olivia, for bringing such useful and thought-provoking insights on active listening. I think I'm sure The viewers will get to assess a lot in themselves, to assess and find out whether they are really listening effectively, whether they are really listening actively, and whether they are really respecting the efforts of the other person of engaging them into a conversation. If I have to summarize this in one line, then I would say listen, speak, and listen again. Your ears have power. Learn to use them wisely. I think that summarize what we have discussed now. I wish we could have spoken more and I could have listened more, but the time is not permitting us. And I thank Vandana for accepting our invite to be on the show, and I request her to be on the show again and again. And I thank Olivia, as always, for partnering with me in driving this transformative journey ahead. Wishing everyone a very happy, prosperous, and wonderful year. Please do bring the coach in you out and help others becoming better leaders. On that note, thank you very much. Bye and good night. Thanks, Vandana. Thank you, Olivia.
Thanks so much, both. Lovely.
Thank